Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Part 2. 2 weeks after the last dinner party, Dr. Jekyll sat with his old friend, the lawyer Mr. Utterson. Utterson had finally made the decision to confront Jekyll about something that had been bothering him for months: the strange will Jekyll had left behind, which stated that in the event of his death, all his property should be given to a mysterious man named Mr. Hyde. Utterson could no longer ignore the subject, especially after hearing about Hyde and his involvement in bizarre events. He began to feel that there was something dark surrounding this relationship. As the conversation turned to the will, Utterson noticed that Jekyll seemed unusually tense and angry. When Utterson started asking about Hyde's identity, Jekyll sharply demanded that he stop pursuing the topic. However, Utterson was determined to understand the connection between Jekyll and Hyde, and insisted on knowing the truth. Jekyll then told his friend that he could get rid of Hyde at any time, prompting Utterson to urge him to do so immediately. Jekyll responded strangely, saying, "I am very much concerned about him." He then continued, asking Utterson to honor the terms of the will and ensure that everything was handed over to Hyde in the event of Jekyll's disappearance or death. Utterson was filled with confusion. He realized that something deeply strange was happening, but Jekyll, despite the gravity of the situation, seemed to be asking for his help. It was clear that the conflict between Jekyll and Hyde was more complicated than Utterson had imagined. Finally, in a state of helplessness, Utterson promised to do as Jekyll asked. But in that moment, there was something unsettling in Jekyll's eyes that made Utterson wonder if he had walked into a much bigger trap than he realized. The brutal murder of the well-known politician Sir Danvers Carew shocked London. On the night of the incident, the maid at Dr. Jekyll's house had been gazing at the bright moon when she saw two men walking along the path. The first was an elegant older man, while the other was a small, dark-coated figure. The man she immediately recognized as Mr. Hyde. What happened next was horrifying. She saw Hyde strike the elderly Carew with his cane, sending the man falling to the ground, motionless. When the maid regained her composure, she rushed to the police, who discovered that the murdered man was Sir Danvers Carew. What was more alarming was that the cane used in the crime belonged to Dr. Jekyll. In a state of terror, Utterson, Jekyll's old friend, hurried to the hospital to confirm the identity of the victim, only to be shocked further when he realized the cane had been a gift from Utterson to Jekyll years before. While the police worked to solve the crime, Utterson began to suspect that Hyde might be the murderer, and he started to believe there was an unseen connection between him and Jekyll. He resolved to track down Hyde to his apartment, hoping to solve the mystery before it was too late. The next morning, Utterson brought the police to Mr. Hyde's apartment in the notorious Soho district, an area filled with poverty and crime. Utterson was shocked to think that a nobleman like Dr. Jekyll could have any connection to such a dark part of the city. When they arrived at Hyde's apartment, an elderly woman greeted them, looking confused when the police inquired about Hyde. She told them that he didn't live there regularly, but had only visited a day earlier, which raised more suspicions about his strange behavior. When Utterson requested to see the apartment, the woman led them inside. What they found surprised Utterson. The apartment was lavishly decorated, with expensive paintings on the walls and fine furniture, an astonishing contrast to the dark character of Hyde. It was clear that Jekyll must have helped select the decorations, as he was known for his love of art and fine taste. Yet, despite the luxury, the apartment was in complete disarray. Clothes were scattered around, drawers were left open, and ash from burnt papers filled the fireplace. The police found a piece of a checkbook with clear banking information, and, to their astonishment, the name Mr. Edward Hyde was written clearly on it. This discovery brought a glimmer of hope to the police that they might soon capture Hyde. Utterson was initially baffled by Hyde's carelessness, particularly since a man as elusive as Hyde would not usually leave such clues behind. He wondered, how could a man like Hyde be so careless? The police were confident that they were close to solving the case. They expected that Hyde would be in jail within a couple of days. At that moment, Utterson said with deep conviction, "I hope you're right. Nothing would please me more than to see the end of Mr. Edward Hyde." However, while things seemed to be heading toward a resolution, there was an unsettling mystery in the case that Utterson could not ignore. One dark evening, Utterson visited Dr. Jekyll's house, increasingly worried after the horrifying news of the murder Hyde had committed. When he arrived, the servant, Poole, informed him that Dr. Jekyll was in very poor health and preferred to stay locked away in his lab. But despite his illness, Jekyll had insisted that Utterson be the only visitor allowed. When Utterson entered, he was shocked by the sight of his old friend in such a deteriorated state, clearly mentally and emotionally distressed. They began to discuss Hyde, and it was clear that Jekyll was deeply regretful and terrified. Jekyll told Utterson, "I swear to you, I will never see Hyde again. It's all over. I'm certain he is gone." But Utterson, knowing Jekyll well, sensed that things were more complicated than they appeared. At that moment, Jekyll pulled out a strange letter he had received recently, but hesitated to show it to Utterson. He told him that he no longer cared about what happened to Hyde and had completely severed ties with him. However, Utterson insisted on seeing the letter to decide what to do, and finally, Jekyll reluctantly agreed. The letter was written in a strange, sharp handwriting, indicating that Hyde was leaving the city for good. It seemed to reassure Jekyll that nothing would happen to him anymore. But the shock came when Jekyll revealed that he had burned the envelope, and it had no postmark, making it impossible to trace the sender. As Utterson began to think more deeply about the situation, he recalled the strange will Jekyll had left, which made Hyde the sole heir to his estate in the event of Jekyll's death or disappearance. The whole situation seemed even more bizarre, especially when Utterson wondered if Jekyll had lied to him about his relationship with Hyde. As Utterson was about to leave, he asked Poole about any new letters, but Poole denied that any had arrived that day. Utterson was stunned. Had the letter really arrived? Or was it part of a complicated game that Jekyll was playing with Hyde? Utterson left Jekyll's house with a deep sense of anxiety and growing curiosity. Had Jekyll really severed ties with Hyde? Or was there another secret hidden behind these strange events? The answers grew more elusive, but one thing was certain. Utterson was facing a puzzle that needed solving before things grew even more complicated. The next morning, as the fog rolled in across the city, Utterson entered his office, his mind consumed with questions about the murder of Sir Danvers Carew and the mysterious figure of Mr. Hyde. He could not shake his growing suspicion that Jekyll might be hiding something, especially after he had discovered that Jekyll had been covering for Hyde. In his office, Utterson told his assistant, Mr. Guest, about the letter he had received from Jekyll, which was written in Hyde's handwriting. Guest examined the letter carefully and confirmed that the handwriting was unusual but not insane. He then showed Utterson another letter he had received from Jekyll, which was a dinner invitation. However, Guest noticed a strange similarity between the two handwriting samples. Utterson's suspicions grew as he realized that the two letters were eerily similar. After comparing them, he became convinced that there was something unusual going on between Jekyll and Hyde, and that Jekyll might be hiding something. At that moment, Utterson decided to keep the letter locked away in his office, away from prying eyes. As the story of Sir Danvers Carew's murder spread through the streets, Mr. Hyde had completely vanished. as though he had disappeared from the face of the earth. Everyone was talking about his evil deeds, yet strangely, Dr. Jekyll, after the crime, seemed to be in remarkable health and spirits. He returned to his social life, attending parties and social events, and appeared healthier than ever. But in January, Jekyll's behavior began to change dramatically. He refused visitors once again, and his health and mood deteriorated. At first, Utterson thought it was just a passing phase, but when Jekyll completely isolated himself, Utterson became worried. He decided to visit his old friend, Dr. Lanyon, hoping the physician could shed some. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and activate notifications by pressing the bell button. Thank you for watching. See you in the third part.